Part 1 of the government song. This song was written in order to help you know the difference between government and economy. It has motions that go along in class, so be sure to pay attention to those as well. But the first part of the song is pretty repetitive. You should repeat it over and over as the other parts are going on in rounds. And so the first part goes like this. It goes, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government, G-g-g-government, G-g-g-g-government. If you're not sure what a government is, go ahead and click here. It'll give you more details about what a government does for you. Part 2 of this song refers to the different types of democracies. There are 2 types of democracies found within the world. There's presidential, which is direct, and parliamentary, which is indirect. If you're not sure what either of those words means, feel free to click on the links below for direct or indirect. Here's part 2 of the song. It goes, presidential is direct, parliamentary indirect, presidential is direct, parliamentary indirect, presidential is direct, parliamentary indirect, presidential is direct, parliamentary indirect. Easy, right? Well, that'll go on after they say government. After the third G, you can go ahead and join in with presidential is direct, etc. It just repeats over and over and over again to help you remember the difference between the 2 kinds of democracies. If you would like to click on either of those links again, make sure that you know what direct means versus indirect. These are the kinds of democracies. Click on them to learn about what a direct democracy is. Click on them to know what an indirect democracy is. Or if you're still not sure about the 2, you can look at a comparison page which shows both, or you can click on the alternative analogy for the democracies. The third part of the song goes like this. Autocracy, democracy, and oligarchy, the types that say who has the power in the government. Autocracy, democracy, and oligarchy, the types that say who has the power in the government. You can click autocracy to learn more about what that definition is and examples of it. Democracy here and oligarchy here. You may have wondered, what does the government do for you? Well, governments help provide clean drinking water. They also provide regulations for medications and foods through something called the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They also help create and enforce electricity rules and more. Every country around the world makes a different system and type of government to help make jobs as well as create and enforce laws. These are different around the world, and countries change over time what system that they have or what type they have due to major events like wars or revolutions. You may be able to think of a country in Europe that we've studied, or a country in the world who's changed governments due to a revolution. Before the revolution they had one government, and then after the revolution they had a different kind of government. So major events throughout the world also help change the systems and type of government in a country. This song that we've created for you is to help you differentiate between government and economy. A lot of people confuse government terms with economic terms. So some of the ways that we can help you is we made this song, so if it's in the song, it's part of the government. If it's in the slideshow, it's part of the government. Though economy and government are tied together, you don't want to confuse them. To go back to the government song part 1, click here. On this slide, you're going to learn about presidential direct democracies. In the song, it says presidential is direct. And what that means is people personally get to vote on the leader. They also personally elect the representatives for the legislative branch. To help you visualize this, citizens, which could be you when you're 18 or me, go to a voting booth, and then at the voting booth, they get to decide who they want their representatives in the legislature, like the Senate or the House of Representatives, to be. And they also get to vote for the leader of the country. You get to vote for the president. So after votes are sent out, they tally them up, and all the results are sent with all the other votes to decide who the leader of the country is and who the representatives of the legislature will be. If you would like to have extra practice with this, you can click on direct democracy practice. Also feel free to click on the link that takes you back to the government song part 2. On this slide, you're going to learn about how parliamentary indirect democracies work. In an indirect democracy, this is different from the way that the United States government works because we get to vote directly for the leader, for our president. However, in other countries, people select a representative, and then that party with the majority selects the leader for the country. I know this one sounds a little bit more complicated. Here is a visual to help you understand it a little better. Citizens, like you or me, whenever we reach the age that we get to vote, a lot of countries is 18, but it differs between countries. They'll go to a voting booth and they will vote for a representative. They vote for representatives as a part of the Senate, as a part of the House of Representatives. They vote for representatives in parliaments or Bundestags. Every country has a different type of legislature. So the legislative branch is elected by the citizens, and the representatives meet together, and they're a part of the legislative branch. Again, legislative branch meaning the House of Representatives, the Senate, Parliament, the House of Commons, the Bundestag. There's so many names around the world, but these are the ones who help make the laws in the country. Then the legislative branch, after meeting and after being elected, they go and also vote for who they think should be the leader of the government. And so they go to the voting booth and they tally up all the legislative branch results, and in the end they get their chief executive, their leader. In some countries they call the leader of a parliamentary democracy a prime minister. Other countries call them a president, other places call them a chancellor. It really depends on what country you're living in. But this is different because the chief executive is selected by the majority of legislative votes. Yes, the legislature is chosen by citizens as well, but the legislative branch is the one that kind of has more power in the situation, a parliamentary democracy. On this slide, we're going to look at, again, the difference between presidential and parliamentary democracies. As you can read in this diagram, it says the presidential relationship. Voters elect the legislature, in our country known as the House of Representatives and the Senate. We vote for the legislature, and we vote for the chief executive, who is part of the executive branch. The legislature and the executive are independent and co-equal, so they balance and they share power. Ultimately, what we're trying to help you see in the presidential relationship, though, is that this is a direct democracy. People vote for the leaders themselves at the voting booth. Both the legislative branch, that one's sometimes hard to say, and the executive branch. This is different than the other system we're going to look at now, which is parliamentary. In a parliamentary system, it says voters elect the legislative branch, and the chief executive is taken out of the legislature branch. So the legislative branch is the one that decides who the chief executive is. So you can kind of see how the arrows point, the citizens vote for the legislature, and then the legislature, out of it, is the chief executive. So there's not two separate, independent, and co-equal branches. They're one and the same, and they work together more. On this slide, we're going to see our alternative analogy comparison. The different types of democracies can be confusing, presidential being direct, parliamentary being indirect. So we're going to use airplane flights to help you kind of visualize what the difference between the two is. So our question for you is, which of the following routes is a direct flight and which is indirect? Here's option A. Option A, the plane comes in, you get on the plane, you fly to a destination, and then you switch or there's a temporary stop. A different plane comes in, and then finally you land in the final destination. So is that a direct flight or an indirect flight? Here's option B. Option B, the plane comes in, you get on the flight, and then it lands directly where you need to go or indirectly where you need to go. So which option is the direct flight? If you thought option B, you're correct. Option A is an indirect parliamentary example of how the citizens vote for the legislature, and then the legislature is the one that chooses the chief executive. In option B, which is the direct flight, a presidential system, the citizens get to vote directly for their leaders, both presidential leaders like the president, the chief executive position, and the legislative position. To go back to the democracy song, part 2, click here. Who has the power in an autocracy? Your hand motion dictates that it's one. Autocracy, the world, means self-ruled. One person has the power in an autocracy, and below are some examples. There's a monarchy who rules because of their family, like a king, a queen, a czar, a pharaoh, an emperor, and so many other names around the world, where the monarch, the king, the ruler, decides what is going on in the country. They decide who gets what the laws are, who goes to jail. They're the ones who are the ultimate power, which is self-ruled autocracy. Another kind of autocracy is a dictatorship, where the dictator rules by military force. You can see in the image the ruler, the dictator, has the weapons, and the citizens beneath him are following his directions because he's the only one that has power. It's a self-governed state. So autocracy means one person has the power. Democracy. Who has the power in a democracy? Well, the people have the power in a democracy. People elect their government officials. We've learned about the two types of democracies in part 2 of the government song, presidential being direct, parliamentary being indirect. So those are the two types of democracies found in the world. Different countries use different systems, but in a democracy, the people decide who the rulers are, they decide who the leaders are, and they elect those leaders, and they elect for laws. So they get to choose and help create their government systems. In order to go back to song 2, part 2 or 3, click on the following links. This type of government that we're going to talk about is an oligarchy. Who has the power in an oligarchy? An oligarchy is defined as a small group of people who have the power. They either get that power by being really wealthy, having lots of land, being religious leaders in control of the government, or having an army. In the image below, you'll see how it's the wealthy people who are in control of the citizens in something called an aristocracy. You'll also see an image of an oligarchy. Another way that I remember that an oligarchy is ruled by a small group of people is I think about the letter O and how the letter O is kind of like a round table where only a small group of people can sit. So oligarchy being a small group of people have the power. If you would like to click on part 1 song link, part 2 song link, part 3 song link, go ahead and click here. You may have asked yourself before, what if there was no government? Well, no government refers to a state of anarchy. Anarchy meaning when there's no government. People often, when they get frustrated, think it might be a good solution to have an anarchy, but anarchy is very dangerous. At places that it has happened around the world includes a city called Kowloon and other places around the world. We'll talk about this in class one day, but you can see in the image below that people get to decide whatever that they want to do, good or bad, and usually the people who are in the bad states are the ones who end up having a lot of power in an anarchy. Here's the city of Kowloon. Kowloon was a city that just built itself up on top of each other. They didn't have any building codes. They didn't have a FDA, a Federal Drug Administration. They didn't have any kind of laws or protection, and the city just was filled with madness and filled with all kinds of drugs. You'll see in the next slide. If you'd like to click on part 1 of the song, part 2 of the song, or part 3 of the song, you may click on the corresponding link. The city of anarchy of Kowloon, you can see all the different compartments of the buildings that were just stacked on top of each other. Kowloon did not have a government. They didn't have any rules or laws. They had no building codes, no FDA, lots of problems, and a ton of drugs and crime. States of anarchy can be extremely dangerous, and so governments help provide laws and safety for its citizens and its country. If you'd like to go back to part 1 of the song, part 2 of the song, or part 3 of the song, click on the corresponding link.